Breaking news, Canon has leaked two brand new cameras, the entry-level R50 and the mid-level full-frame R8. I have almost all of the specs. I will tell you all about it, including how they compare to the closest Sony and Nikon competition. It's bad news for Sony and Nikon, it really is. First, thanks to Canon Rumors for providing the bulk of this information about the Canon R50. The price of this is going to be $680 US. That makes it the entry-level Canon RF camera. With the kit lenses, it'll be about $1,030, and that includes the basic 18 to 45 plus the 55 to 210. This is the less expensive configuration compared to the 18 to 150 that I recommend most people upgrade to. But at least it comes with a telephoto lens so people can get sports and stuff. This is the kit that people will pick up at Best Buy when they're just shopping. You know, it's not for you who's like on here researching cameras. This is more of like a spontaneous, unplanned purchase. Canon Rumors is saying that it could be coming in two different colors, and this totally tracks because Canon loves to make their entry-level cameras in a couple of different colors to make it more attractive at Best Buy. Canon Rumors also suggest that this is the M50 Mark II replacement. This is Canon's now outdated M series cameras, which was their first like APS-C mirrorless cameras. And that makes some sense unless you look at the price. This is less expensive by $200 than the Canon R10. And to me, the Canon R10 is more like the M6 Mark II replacement. After all, it has an electronic viewfinder and most of the specs. It's a good hybrid camera without getting too expensive. We have to figure out how Canon can shave off $200, like 30% of the price. Let's compare it to the prices of the closest competitors. In this price range, we have the Sony ZV-E10. That is their creator-centric camera and the least expensive E-mount entry. And Nikon has this camera, the Nikon Z30, at $660, almost the exact same price as the Canon. What do the ZV-E10 and the Nikon have in common? Well, no viewfinder. They're both creator cameras, which just have a flip screen because they'll be mostly used like this. Or they'll be used for still photography by younger people who grew up using their smartphones as their cameras, and they're more accustomed to using a screen. Anybody under like 25, if I hand them a camera, they hold it out like this and they use the rear screen and they don't even think about the viewfinder. So I think that might be how they're shaving off $200. Now, a lot of you are going to say, oh, that makes me so mad. I absolutely need an electronic viewfinder. Okay, that will force you to upgrade to the more expensive Canon R10, and that is what Canon wants. They want people like you who are photography enthusiasts, I know this because you're watching this channel, they want you to spend more. They do not want to cannibalize their sales. They are not going to drive people down to less expensive cameras by offering very capable cameras at lower prices. They want you to feel like you're making a sacrifice when you get the basic camera. And I think that's how they're going to do it. They're going to take away the electronic viewfinder. That's a really easy upsell. And in that case, I think the two different colors could look more like the M6 Mark II. And I think the two different colors will probably be a retro-styled version since Sony and Nikon and Fuji are doing these retro-styled cameras. We do not have leaked specs for the R50, but here's what I think they're going to look like. Again, I think it's going to be a creator-centric camera. I think it'll have a 24 megapixel sensor because Canon's been offering 24 megapixels even on their entry-level cameras like the T7 forever. It'll do 4K 30 full width, and I think it'll offer 4K 60 just so they can put it on the box, but it'll have a huge crop, like a 1.5 times crop. And to me, that makes the 4K 60 essentially useless, especially on an APS-C camera. But people cross-shopping different cameras just kind of want to see, does it have this feature? Yes. Okay, it must have it. I think they'll scale back the frames per second from like the 12 frames per second of the R10 and the R7, and they'll give it just 10 frames per second. And like those two cameras, it'll have just one SD card. And of course, it'll have a Flippy screen like its big brother, the R10. There will definitely be no sensor stabilization, though they will have electronic stabilization when you're recording video. Now let's talk about what you're really interested in, the Canon R8. This information comes from mirrorlessrumors.com, digicam-info.com, and canonrumors.com. The Canon R8 pricing is expected to be about $1,500 for the body alone. That puts it at the same price point as the Canon R7, which is interesting. With the kit, it will cost $1,700. And this is a new kit lens, a 24 to 50 IS with image stabilization, f4.5 to 6.3. Not a great kit lens, only a 2x zoom, though from the pictures I've seen, it should be pretty compact. Let's talk about the specs for a stills camera, and this is leaked from digicam-info. 24 megapixels, which is Canon's sort of bottom line nowadays. 40 frames per second electronic shutter. That matches the 6D Mark II. Now, usually when I talk about Canon's super high frame rate electronic shutters, I say that's useless because of all the rolling shutter. But it's actually not useless on the R6 Mark II. I'm about to share the video specs with you, but because I know it supports full width 4K 60 downscaled from 6K, I know that it has a fast readout speed that should be sufficient for maybe not super fast action, but most birding and sports stuff that you might do. So I think this could really be a usable 40 frames per second for common things. And that's crazy at the $1,500. 40 frames per second for $1,500. This is unheard of, but Canon is being really serious about the competition. I'll compare it to the Sony and Nikon cameras soon, but you'll see Canon is really outshining them. It will have no sensor stabilization. That's one of the ways they'll keep the price low. It'll have a flip screen because all these cameras have the flip screen, and no top LCD. But those specs actually pretty closely match this R6 Mark II. It'll have just one SD card. That's my guess, but I think I'm going to be right about that. And the weight is 461 grams, which is barely a pound, and that's with the battery and the SD card. We're going to get into the weight in a little bit because that's a very important spec. First, let's talk about the R8 video specs. Like I said, it'll do 4K 60 oversampled from 6K video. That means full width, and this is huge. The Sony A7 IV, which is a $2,500 camera, that cannot do that. Not only that, but it'll have better video than the Sony A7S III. I'm assuming because I have tested that against the original R6 and the R6 Mark II, and those Canon cameras outperformed the A7S III because the A7S III is not oversampled. It's reading 1 for 1. They have higher megapixels, so they're cramming all that good detail and color information down into 4K. That is an amazing spec for $1,500. It has never been done before. So for creators, that is going to pull so many creators into the ecosystem. And right now I'm filming this on a Canon RP, which is like a $900 camera, but that's why it's in 1080 and not in 4K. And I would totally spring $1,500 to upgrade this studio to 4K. For slow motion, it'll have 1080 at 180 frames per second, which matches the R6 Mark II. It's a lot like the R6 Mark II. And it'll have C-Log 3, which increases the dynamic range in video. It'll have no sensor stabilization, but electronic stabilization in video, which again is just like cropping and moving it around. It's kind of like just stabilizing it in post, except you don't have to wait for your computer to process it. And it'll have a microphone and HDMI, but the specs don't mention whether it'll have a headphone jack. Canon does sometimes leave off headphone jacks from their entry-level cameras. Here's how the R8 price compares against other entry-level full-frame mirrorless cameras. Canon's own RP that I'm filming this on is $900 or $1,000. The Z5, which we tested and loved, is $1,300. The Canon R, the original camera that they launched at the end of 2018, is $1,400. So the R8 will be $1,500. The A7C, Sony's cheapest full-frame camera, is $1,800. So you see how it fits in. It is not the cheapest. It is not the most bare bones. But from this, we can also see Sony is really being left out of the entry-level full-frame camera market. If you have less than $1,500 to spend, you either have to buy an APS-C Sony or you go with one of the competitors. I cannot believe it's taken Sony this long to compete. Here's something really compelling. The weights of these cameras. The R8 is 1.02 pounds. Which is so much lighter than all of the competition. It is so much lighter than the Canon RP, which is the $900,000 camera. And this is so stripped down. This seems like it weighs nothing. It has this tiny little battery which is so much smaller than the battery that you get in the R6, which it's actually a problem. Like, it runs out of batteries really quickly. The R8 weighs less than this. That means that we have to start with this and then shave off 1/20th of a pound, 24 grams. And like, how do you do this? How could I look at this and subtract anything at all? The only thing I can come up with is that it will not have an electronic viewfinder. I think this is going to be a creator-centric full-frame camera. Some of you are going to be upset by that. But again, this is the only thing that can explain how this can coexist with the brand new $2,500 R6 Mark II. Like, let's compare the side-by-side specs here. The R8 is $1,000 cheaper, like 40% less expensive. They both offer 40 frames per second with the electronic shutter, though I'm guessing the R8 mechanical shutter is going to be slower. Still, the 40 frames per second electronic shutter should be usable because they both have full width 4K 60, so the sensor is capable of a high readout speed. And they both offer that 180 frames per second in HD. The Canon R6 Mark II has IBIS, while the R8 does not, and the Canon R6 Mark II has 2 SD cards. But IBIS and 2 SD cards do not add up to $1,000 price difference. Let's compare the R8 to the Nikon Z5. The Z5 is cheaper, $200 cheaper at $1,300, but in every other way it really does not compare. With 40 frames per second with the electronic shutter, the Z5 does 4.5 frames per second. So it's not really a sports camera at all. It's also not really a video camera, at least not a 4K video camera. While it has 4K, it has a 1.7 times crop, which is huge. And we found the autofocus in 4K to be completely unusable. So I do not recommend the Z5 for people looking to do 4K video at all. While this camera seems like it's going to be a 4K creator monster. And the Z5 will have 2 SD card slots. I do not expect the R8 to have 2 SD card slots. Rumors say this is going to launch ahead of the CP Plus photo conference that's coming up on February 8th. Subscribe, because as soon as this camera launches, we will have reviews ready for you for both of these cameras. And in the comments down below, tell us what you want to test. What do you want to know? What will help you decide whether or not you should buy it? And what cameras do you want to see us compare it against? Bye.